All right, guys. Welcome to the First Responder Playbook. I'm here with Patrick Faulkner. Patrick, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Oh, geez. Do you want the Reader's Digest version or the Time Life magazine expose?
I definitely want the expose.
You want the expose? Okay,
Yeah.
so it was a Saturday morning. It was about 9:46 a.m., February 1975 when I was born. I was born in a small house in Pensacola, Florida. I'm just kidding. So my name is Patrick Faulkner. And as you could see, maybe from this very bad background, I also am a podcast host for the Knock and Talk Show, a little comic relief from the streets. I met Brent through the ADB Nation, where I currently work. We'll get into that later. I was born in Florida, moved to Knoxville in middle school and high school, moved to Baltimore, which is why I sound funny. Graduated in 93, so that's why this gray patch is right there. Moved to Birmingham, which is where all my family is from. Lived with my grandfather after my grandmother passed away to help him kind of like settle into this new chapter of his life. And it took exactly 6 months of the romantic stories he told of the Second World War in order for me to join the Air Force. He was in the Army Air Corps, as was my dad's father, and my uncle was in the Air Force. So I picked up the torch, joined the Air Force in 95. I served through 1999. I did 2 tours in the desert, one in Jordan, one in Bahrain. And then thanks to Clinton and his Do More with Less campaign, it was time for me to get out. I didn't re-enlist, so I got out. And when I got out, I was in 1999. I was no more qualified to do anything that I wasn't qualified to do before I went in. Does that make sense? Did I say that right? Anyway, so I had 3 choices because I was interviewing for avionics. Well, that's what I did in the Air Force. I guess I should say that. I was avionics technician on the F-16s, which is a really fancy way of saying I take a broken box out of the plane and I grab a new good box and I put that one into the plane, and then we get pickles in the pickle jar. So when I got out, I was told I was too military specific and I was overqualified for every avionics position I was applying for. And in the late 90s and early 2000s, no one gave a rat's rear end if you were a veteran. It didn't mean anything. It just meant that you could drink beer on a base versus drinking beer on a college campus. So I had 3 choices. I could be a garbage man, a fireman, or a cop. And well, garbage stinks. Although in retrospect, those dudes make a lot of money. I should have probably done that. Firemen run into burning buildings on purpose. To me, that's psychotic. So where else can you drive fast, carry a gun, and help people? And so that's what I picked. So in 99, I joined the Gwinnett County Police Department in Metro Atlanta. Then for the next 16 and a half years, I worked at 4 different agencies. And there was a reason why each one of the shifts, they were all on my terms. It wasn't like I was bounced out or anything.
Right.
2007, I decided I wanted to be a small business owner, and I started my own company. And some of your listeners may remember that was probably the worst year to start a business with the housing crash. So when I left Gwinnett in 2007, I was told don't come back from those people that left and came back. They said you're treated differently. Leadership reminds you that you owe them for allowing you to come back. So I went to work for a very small police department. When I say small, it was 7 men strong, to include the chief, the assistant chief, which was also the detective and armorer and crime scene technician. And I think he wore a couple other hats. We had a lieutenant who was the patrol commander, and then we had 4 worker bees. We worked 12-hour shifts, and I was the only one on my shift in my uniform. So I worked 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And this town was 2.5 square miles. There was 200 front doors in the whole town. There was not a traffic light, a lot of stop signs, but no traffic lights. It was literally Mayberry, like 2007, 2008, I guess is when I went back in. So, yeah, I stayed there for 2.5 years, but then at that point, the city couldn't afford the police department anymore, so they disbanded the PD and turned it over to the SO to run calls. And I didn't want to wear brown. I'd only worn blue. I didn't want to wear brown. And in Georgia, you wore blue, and you actually got to work calls, or you wore brown and you were a professional adult babysitter and had keys to, and that didn't excite me at all. So I went to work for another small agency, but it was a little bit bigger. I think it was about 40 officers. And I was there a year and a day, and that was the most miserable place I'd ever worked in my entire life, to include the military. My sergeant got his stripes because he put the deck on the chief's house. Give you an idea of that good old boy club. So I knew more about policing than my sergeant did. He was 5 or 6 year veteran. At that point, I had about 10 years, and I was the first officer to arrest a woman for domestic violence in that police department's history, and it was founded in the 1800s.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it was a miserable place. I couldn't wait to get out. So I was actually recruited to go start a police department. And how awesome is that? I mean, so there was a college police department in Metro Atlanta that was transitioning from a security department into a police department. And one of my old friends from Gwinnett called and was like, "Hey, dude, you want to come work here and be a startup officer?" And I was like, "Sure. Yeah. Who turns that down?" So that's what I did. I was there 4.5 years, and I tore my rotator cuff off duty. I was the canine handler, canine sergeant, patrol sergeant, field training coordinator, special operations sergeant, the captain's right hand man. It was great. I loved it. But my last day of FMLA protection was the day of my shoulder surgery. So when the doctor said you're clear to go back, the agency was like, "Well, sorry, kid. We've given your dog to somebody. We've given your stripes to somebody else. We don't have a canine sergeant position available. Good luck to you." Which was in 2014. So that was the beginning of the hands up, don't shoot, can't breathe. The BLM movement, the assassination of police officers was beginning, like the onslaught, right? This job has never been safe. But at that point, it was just downright dangerous. Officers having coffee in a coffee shop and getting executed in the back of the head. So I think it was a blessing in disguise. So I've done everything in police work you can do in polyester and Kevlar, but ride a horse or ride a motorcycle. So that's halfway Reader's Digest, halfway Time Life.
Okay. So the sheriff's office in Oklahoma, I mean, a lot of times, the sheriff's responsible for the jail and stuff like there. In Georgia, especially Gwinnett County, did you have to start in the jail or dispatch? Or did they hire you straight out on the patrol? Or
yeah, so in Metro Atlanta, and then there's some outlying counties. We have both a county PD and a county sheriff's office in the same county. And in that instance, the PD runs the calls for the county, and the SO runs court security, warrants, and the jail. Now we've got 200 something counties in Georgia, and there's a lot of counties that just have an SO for the county, and they do the calls for service as well as courthouse and jail. But in Metro Atlanta, most counties have both a county PD and an SO. So I got hired directly in as a road officer.
Okay.
In Georgia, because there's a lot of poor small counties. The county has 1 year to send you to jailer school after you've been hired. So you go through FTO in the jail to learn your job. And then they have a year to send you to jailer school to learn the legalities of your job.
They do something similar in Oklahoma. It used to be a year, but they changed it down to 6 months. And
okay.
So I'm familiar with that process, but I actually got to check with that because we have some young guys in the academy right now, and they just changed how they're doing it again, and now they want them to finish in 6 months. So we're having to get them an extension letter, and I'm like, let's just settle somewhere and stay.
Yeah. Right. So
what,
let me ask you this: if once they go through the academy and they become road certified, whatever that is in Oklahoma, do they stick them back in the jail for a undetermined amount of time, or do they get to roll right into patrol once they've graduated?
It depends. The bigger sheriff's offices like Oklahoma and Tulsa County, there's a good chance you're either going to go to the courts or the jail for a while and maybe spend a couple of years in that and then go out to patrol if you want.
Okay.
But most municipalities, state agencies, tribal agencies, you can go straight into patrol. And that's how I was in dispatch, but then I got hired I worked at a couple of municipalities, and they usually would hire a lot of uncertified guys and send them to the academy. And that's what's unique about our tribal agency is half of them we send to the state academy, and then half of them we send to the Indian Police Academy through FLETC in Artesia, New Mexico. And then when they get done there, they have to come back, and it's now online, but it's a reciprocity thing where they do like 6-7 weeks of online stuff specific to Oklahoma, and so it really depends on which ones we can get spots in where we send ours. But for the most part, you can go straight to the road in Oklahoma. But some of the bigger sheriff's offices, obviously, they're hurting for people. So there's a good chance if you go to the sheriff's office, you might work in the jail for a while. Yeah.
Adult babysitting.
Well, and here's the deal. They don't pay people enough to do that. Like that's an underpaid job. And like my hat goes off to them because like you couldn't pay me to do it. Like you'd have to double my salary. And even then I'd probably still gripe every day.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's always sunny and 72. You get that fluorescent sunburn when you're inside the jail, right? So I think that's the only benefit. You don't have to work wrecks in the rain, but you got to deal with, he stole my sandwich, or she didn't flush or stuff too much TP. I can't. I couldn't.
I'm out on that as well. So, looking back on it, what's your favorite moment from your time at the sheriff's office?
Well, I never worked at an SO. I always worked at a PD.
I'm sorry, the county PD.
Oh my gosh. The best time. I've got to say, so when I worked at Gwinnett PD, I was uniform patrol for about 4 years, and I made detective. I worked in the burglar unit and the special victims unit for a grand total of 2.5 years. It was a year in burglary and then a year and a half in special victims. I gotta say the most interesting thing looking back at that agency was while I was in the burglary unit, we had an international construction site theft ring that it was made up mostly of Romanian immigrants, and we got like really into that. I learned a lot about the Romanian culture as part of that investigation. It was almost a year long. It's about 9 months in total. We ended up, as part of the sting, when we finally went in and did the search warrant and the sting. We had members of ICE. We had members of the FBI. We had members of the Secret Service, all kind of involved in different aspects of this. And we found, and Interpol, because we located a international homicide fugitive from Romania. His crew broke him out on a prisoner transport, like you would see in a movie theater. Gorgé Axon was his name, or is his name. And during that prison escape, there were several guards that were killed. So they wanted him pretty bad. Interpol wanted him pretty bad. So they put a hold on him and came and snatched him up and sent him back. Haven't heard anything about him since then, but I think that was pretty cool. That the house we hit was built completely off of stolen items.
Wow.
All the fixtures, all the doors, all the appliances, the fencing, the pool, the air conditioning unit, the roof shingles. I mean, literally everything on that house was stolen. And we had a list of victims, right, from all the different burglary sites that got hit. And we just called them all and was like, hey, scene safe. Come take a look. If one of your items on this property sheet is here, come take it. It was less that we had to take back to the headquarters and try to process. We could release it there at the scene. It was like a giveaway.
I've actually had that from some burglaries and stuff where you're just like, hey, come see what's yours and what's not yours. I mean, but that's an interesting concept, because like if a full house, fence, pool, everything's from stolen items, like you can't put that in the evidence room.
Nope. Yeah.
Like you got to get creative at that point.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So now, that was probably the most interesting story I can remember.
So how much stuff did you get returned?
Oh gosh, I can't even remember.
Would you say like most of it? Like, did most of these people come and identify their stuff, or?
A lot of them had already gotten paid out by the insurance company, but it was the high-end appliances, the door. Dude, this was a mahogany door. It took our door guy, because we did a no knock. It took him almost 3 solid minutes of hitting this door. And eventually it was the door jam that gave. Not the door had a couple dents in it. Like this was an amazing door. So that got returned. But all the appliances, the external AC unit and the handler inside got returned. I think everything else was just kind of written off. And it's not like we were going to take the shingles off the roof. I think bits and pieces of the pool, the furniture, anything that you could put in a truck that wasn't damaged from installation, I think we were able to get returned. But a lot of it was written off and paid for by insurance companies.
That's wild. That's actually a really awesome story, because like no one would believe that. She was like, yeah, we see, pretty much took over a house that everything's stolen. Like not one thing's not stolen. That's wild.
Yeah.
So when you got back into it and the market crashes, you're back in law enforcement in a small town. That's a completely different animal. How did you adjust, and did you ever receive any pushback? Because I'm sure coming from a bigger agency, you were probably a little bit more proactive. Did you ever receive any pushback off that at the smaller agency?
There were no, not really. Our chief was very, very supportive. He said he would tell us, he wouldn't tell us who, but he would tell us, hey, I got a phone call from one of those tickets that you wrote last night. Good job. Way to go. If somebody tells you they know who I am and tells you to call me and it's 3:00 in the morning, don't you effing call me. I'll deal with them in the morning. So it was great. Dave Hill, fantastic chief. He was a big guy. Like he played defensive lineman for the Steelers. I want to say in the early 2000s, early 90s. Messed up his knees, but so big guy, right? Part of the Iron Curtain. And funny story about him, he'd come out on nights and ride with you, and it wasn't to like, I'm the chief, let me see how you do things. He was freaking bored and wanted to be a part of the guys, Yep. And he'd come out with no vest, no gun. He'd have his radio, but it would sit in the cup holder,
like a ride along almost.
Yeah, and I'd be like, "Hey, Chief, you gonna bring Roscoe with you?" And he's like, "No, man, I got all I need right here: DOA and RIP."
That's awesome.
He was a good guy. So yeah, he was very supportive. If we had to lock somebody up, you lock them up. If they were drunk, you took them to jail. But he also gave you the leniency of that officer discretion that if they were, under the influence, but you could get them home and it was appropriate to do so. He was okay with you making that call as well.
Right.
He was good. There was, the town rolled up at like 9 PM, there's just nothing moving. There was a part of town where the speed limit went from 55 to 45 to 35 right through Main Street. And it was easy to get speeding. You could do that all day long and every day and twice on Tuesdays. But then at 9 PM, you were like, you went looking for crickets to write noise ordinance violations to, because there's nothing else going on. So you had to fight boredom. That was kind of the biggest issue in that town, right? It was 2.5 square miles. Like it took about 30 minutes to drive every street. And then a 12-hour shift after from 9 PM to 6 AM, you had to get creative to be proactive.
Yep. That's a big adjustment.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. But we had all the tools we needed. That was the first agency that I was introduced to a camera in the car and a body mic. It was still a VHS in the trunk. But that was, my first experience in having calls recorded. And that was actually a blessing for DUIs. It was, it was great. Things that you would forget happened. You go back and watch the tape. Oh, that's right. I remember they said that, or remember they did that. And, you could check your field sobriety card, right? This is what I wrote down, and go back and watch it. Yep, I was spot on. That's exactly where they put their foot down. The number of times they stepped off line. Yep, I got that right too. So, it was nice. It was a very forward-thinking chief with a very small budget.
Yep. There's a lot of towns like that in Oklahoma that, after probably 9, 10 o'clock, there's not much movement. And so we've actually got a lot of that in my current agency, because we have 11 counties, and we have Metro Tulsa for a lot of it, which, they're going to stay pretty hooked up 24/7. But you get down like the far southern part of the reservation, and like you might not see somebody the rest of the night,
Mm-hmm.
And so I tell people all the time, like when they start there, like have an open mind, because there's different styles of policing and different things to do besides just stop every car. And, there's nothing wrong with being proactive, but there's also nothing wrong with getting involved in your community and getting to know them and stuff, because a lot of times those are the ones that give you their best information, are the ones you go out there and make relationships with.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's not necessarily confidential informants, but there's an old saying: if you want to know about a man, talk to his wife. You want to know the truth about a man, go talk to his barber. And people have they get diarrhea of the mouth when they are around people that are comfortable with. So if you want to learn about your community, you have to go knock on the doors of the merchants and go talk to them, and stop by, Annie M at the end of Elm Street and just talk to her while she's, pulling weeds from the flower bed. If you want to learn what's going on in the meth head house behind hers, go talk to her. Right.
Yep.
So yeah, absolutely. You got it. Community policing, I think, is an overused term, and it got misplaced a few years ago. It's not about doing stupid dance contests with music and being recorded and putting on
So
Facebook or Instagram.
yeah.
It's about the getting and out and talking to the community, not these stupid challenges. That's the dumbest stuff ever. Anyway, that's just one
Yep.
cop's opinion.
No, I'm with you on that. So you go to a little bit bigger agency next, and you say it's miserable. I've been around bad leadership, and it just drains you. Is that kind of how you felt? Just you felt like it wouldn't matter what I did, I couldn't do anything right, or I'm just ready to go to a different place. Like this place ain't for me. Like, how did it affect you as a patrol officer?
It was definitely bad leadership. It wasn't, in fact, it wasn't leadership at all. It was management. And I feel like that is coming to light in a lot of agencies now, that there's a focus on the individual officer's mindset and overall health and well-being, right? We have trying to keep this PG. We've got a crap ton of managers out there in leadership positions that have no idea what leadership is.
100%.
Or at one point they were a leader, they got promoted, but out of self-preservation, they became a manager so that they could continue to climb the ladder. And it's easier just to say, yes, boss, we'll make sure that happens, than it is, you know what, I don't know that that's really good for the community or the rank and file. Maybe we should talk about some other way of doing whatever that is, right? So at that medium-sized age, or at least small, medium, schmedium, I guess is really what it was. The chief was a retired Florida state trooper who brought a lot of state trooper mentality to a small police agency or schmedium agency. And he was very traffic thinking and not proactive policing thinking. We had 9 different projects, but we weren't allowed to call them projects. They were housing authorities. Right. We couldn't say the word project over the radio. We'd get in trouble. And that was there was a lot of things like that. A lot of terminology that is just common terminology that when you're in a situation, you're on a call and your muscle memory kicks out and you're trying to tell people where you're at, you're having to try to remember these off-book terms that are just politically correct. They're, it's not cop lingo when you're trying to get something out fast. So there was a lot of that micromanagement that was happening at that agency, and it was too small of an agency where that was effective. At a big agency, it just is what it is, right? At a smaller agency, it's complete micromanagement from the top down, and everybody reports back up to the chief. And heaven forbid you say the word project over the radio. You were going to be standing on the carpet and explaining why you said that word, and it was stupid. Yep. So it was really the level of micromanagement that sent me out the door. And then there were some other policies and procedures that were put in place that just didn't sit well with the level of experience that I had. I was told I was never going to come off nights. I had too much experience to go to day shift. I needed to stay on nights. And again, I mentioned I was the first officer in the history of that agency to lock up a female for domestic violence. And in fact, I had to fight that all the way to the lieutenant in citing Georgia state law on the primary aggressor. It doesn't say the male aggressor. It says the primary aggressor. And you shall, not you will, not you should, you shall. You put those two together. You shall arrest.
Yep.
And in Georgia, there is one law on the books that you can arrest for a crime that hasn't been committed yet. It's domestic violence.
Wow.
If you, as the investigating officer, believe with probable cause that if you were to leave those two people together and you walk away, that there's a crime that will be committed, you can lock up the perceived primary aggressor under the Georgia domestic violence law. Because all too often, officers would leave, and as soon as they would leave, there'd be a homicide.
Yep.
Or somebody severely beaten to within an inch of their life, and the officers they couldn't do anything because there was no crime that was committed, so there was no action that could be taken. So the state legislature got together and like, okay, well, here's the thought police. So I had to actually, even though all of these officers went through the same mandated academy that I went through, that learned the same laws from the same books, they had a different interpretation of the law. And it was always an uphill battle for me to do the job that the chief swore me in to do, that the citizens of that city needed out of me. And I got tired of fighting uphill battle with the people that wore the same uniform as me.
Yep. I've been there. So you go to a college agency, or one starting a college agency. Is it the Ramblin' Wreck?
No, it is not. However, it is part of the University of Georgia, University System of Georgia. So,
what kind of experience did you have? I mean, kind of being at the ground level of an agency starting.
It was a very unique opportunity. I mean, my badge number was 17.
Wow.
Okay, and here's a hashtag side note. Every agency that I went to, the last number of my badge number was a 7. Just
wow.
Randomly. So anyway, it was really cool because I got to help write SOPs from my experience at 3 other agencies and my belief systems into what were solid policies and what were ridiculous policies. Now, I didn't win every time, of course, but I had a hand in influencing a lot of the SOP that became standard operating procedure for that agency. I was the field training coordinator, so I got to write the training book on all new hires that came to our agency, and they all had to, in order to pass field training, they had to come through me. So that was kind of neat to have my hand in the development of new officers. And we hired mainly academy grads from the state academy. We did hire some transfers, some lateral transfers, but most of the officers, after the initial push through, were new guys and gals. So that was really cool to be able to have a finger in the legacy of an agency. But it was also very similar to policing in a small town. We had a very small jury, even though in the state of Georgia, university police officers are state. We have statewide arrest powers. We could go to any campus in the state and have arrest powers. So we're state officers. We had a very small fishing pond that we could go fishing in, and proactivity was not high on the chief's list. I would, once again, in 16 years, I spent 12 of them after dark, right? So I was the nighttime first I worked nights, came in as a patrolman. Within 6 months, I was promoted to sergeant. 6 months after that, I was promoted to both canine handler and canine sergeant, with a dual responsibility of the evening watch patrol sergeant. So I wore a lot of hats at the same time on the same shift. And my shift, evening watch, held or ran the stats for the rest of the agency in arrests, tickets issued, stolen property located, drugs located, you name it. My shift held the record for that. And I was a working sergeant. I couldn't stand sitting in the office with the lieutenant, who always had his feet up on the desk watching some YouTube video of something. And I had to be out in the field with the troops, and I loved it. So there was always kind of a shift challenge to see if you could get to the jail before the sergeant could. And we enjoyed it. We had fun. We enjoyed it. We had our list of chores that we had to do. So we had to go around and lock up all the doors at a certain time. We had to go around and do light checks to make sure that all of the parking lights, stadium lights, the parking deck lights, all of them were functional. If they weren't, we had to write down which ones weren't and turn that over in a morning report so maintenance could get them fixed. And then once an hour, we had to go around and, we had to pull on doors to make sure they were still safe, as well as we had dorms. So we had overnight guests. We had a security team. There were security officers that worked the front desk at the dormitories. And I got to tell you, we had a whole bunch of 13th graders. And it really was a challenge. We were SROs a lot of the time, and having to deal with the children that parents couldn't wait to get out of their homes. That's who we ended up with, the kids that could sign a FASVA and get 1 quarter or 1 semester worth of funding until they flunked out, right? But that's where they end up. They ended up a large number, not all of them, but a large number would end up in the dorms. So we would try to be proactive in and around the dorms, looking for bad guys that didn't belong there. We had a bunch of young kids out on their own for the very first time, new boyfriends, new girlfriends, alcohol, drugs, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? Except it wasn't rock and roll, it was rap. But we would have to, we had domestics inside the dorms that we'd have to go answer. So we did our best to try to discourage visitors that didn't belong there after visiting hours from being on. And we ended up, of course, as you can imagine, arresting a lot of students as well. And we started losing proactivity privileges, if you will.
Been there.
We couldn't make traffic stops.
Been there.
We, as the canine handler, I was not allowed to walk the dog. It was a narco dog. And it was a floppy ear, not a pointy ear. It was a 35-pound chocolate female lab. Okay. But I couldn't take the dog in the dorms because I was arresting too many students, and the college started losing revenue. It all came back to the revenue. So, it had its own, challenges, but it was great. I enjoyed it. Did I answer your question?
You did.
Okay.
But I'm going to segue into, you don't hear college campuses in the first place normally having a canine program. Because how did that happen?
I forced the chief's hand.
Okay.
at the very beginning, we were extremely proactive, and I was going to the jail both as a patrolman and a sergeant 2 or 3 times in a shift, and a lot of it was drugs. And there was no way, because of the Clarity Act, all crimes on campus in Georgia have to be reported, and it has to be reported on the college's website.
Yep.
So, in an effort to satisfy me, because it was the only thing I ever wanted to do in law enforcement was work a dog. Like first day of the academy, the instructors would go around like, so why did you join the police department? Why did you want to become a cop? And because I want to work a dog. So it took a couple of years to get there. It took my 4th agency. But it was the only thing I ever wanted to do. So I set my mind to it, and I was able to prove there was a drug problem on the campus. It was the first year of the dorms. So the college really had no choice but to do something to show that they were combating the drug problem. So there was actually an attempt by leadership to give the canine to anybody but Faulkner. And everybody they went to, they were like, no, that's Faulkner's dog. For that, it's his project, it's his baby. This is what he's doing. Nobody wanted it, and I felt a tremendous amount of respect from those that I was working with, because there were several of the officers that would have been fantastic canine handlers. They had the proactivity mindset. They had the right work ethic to keep up with training and all the stuff. So, but they all turned it down. And so reluctantly, I got selected to be the handler. And so, 11 months after graduating canine school, I went to a international canine convention in Orlando and ended up winning the top dog overall award, not knowing it was a competition. And we went up against 101 other teams from across the country and two other countries. My dog was phenomenal. I was an okay handler. My dog was phenomenal. She made me look like I knew what I was doing all the time. And I just had to watch and let her do her job. She was fantastic at it. So I used that dog for everything she was worth. I would call neighboring agencies at the beginning of the shift to let them know there was a drug dog on the shift and that we were available to do searches if needed. I did all of my training with Georgia State Patrol for our weekly trainings. Right. And they would call us quite a bit to come do tractor trailer searches because her nickname was the Pocket Rocket. She was 35 pounds. I could lift her up by her harness and throw her in the back of a tractor trailer, and she'd go off and she'd do her thing.
Right.
So you're right. There are not a lot of agents, especially having drug dogs. They don't want to know. If they don't report it, it doesn't exist.
Out of sight, out of mind.
That's right. So the July of 2014 is when I tore my rotator cuff. If you were to go back and if you were to pull the stats, the crime stats, the arrest stats for that agency from November 2011 to July of 2014, you'd see a lot of numbers for a small agency, right? And then those numbers stop in August of 2014. Crime just stopped on campus. There was no more drugs on campus.
Yep. And it wasn't because they solved it. It's because they stopped being proactive.
Yep. And they just accepted the fact that was going to be just part of the operating of the campus. If an officer stumbled into something, fine. They have the ability and the training, hopefully, to do that. But there wasn't somebody out there looking to stop it.
Yeah, that's wild to me because when you sweep a problem underneath the rug, it doesn't go away. It's just hiding underneath there.
Sure. The FBI changed the level of burglaries from the severity from a person's crime to a property crime. And that next year, they were able to report that president's efforts, and I can't remember what year it was. I want to say it was Bush's, somewhere in Bush Jr. But that level of person's crimes dropped tremendously over the efforts done by the FBI. It's not true. They just recategorized the crime from a violent crime to a non-violent crime.
Yep.
And now violent crime was down. Right. So yeah, you're right. Sweeping it under the rug doesn't make it go away. It just means it's not being reported. It's still there.
Yep. And the sad thing is that affects the quality of life and the quality of education for other people on campus. Mm-hmm. But if they just don't address it, then hey, we don't got a problem.
That's right. That's right. We don't have a problem. Yeah, and part of what sparked that was in I think it was 2012. There was some reporter that doing a piece on party schools, just pulled crime stats right from colleges all over, and my college was like the 14th or 12th highest rated drug school in the country. Right. And then the president had to say, WTF, we gotta fix this. And that's when proactivity privileges started dwindling away.
Yeah.
Right. We became a 100% reactive agency and not a proactive agency that we could have been.
And here's the deal that at the end of the day, other than sweeping the problem underneath the rug, that's a morale killer for guys. If you tell them that they can't do anything, that's just going to ruin your morale, because there's a lot of guys out there that just enjoy showing up, taking their calls, and going home. There's a lot more guys that like to go out there and shake the bushes a little bit, even if it's not every second of the shift. But you tell them they can't do that, then they're just like, I'll go somewhere else. Or, you know what, I'll take my calls and go home, and don't ask me to do anything extra. And it's bad for law enforcement when that happens.
It is. Yeah. When you come to work and you do nothing for an entire shift, and you've done everything they've expected out of you, and you've done nothing, that is a morale killer.
Yep. Absolutely. So you tear your shoulder up, you have surgery, and they kind of kick you to the streets. How'd you handle that?
Man, that was dark times.
Yeah.
Just to be honest, very dark. Going from being told what to wear to work for 16 years in a job that I both loved and hated, and having an identity finally of Canine Sergeant Faulkner, to just Patrick. It was a very tough pill to swallow. And full transparency, I was going to school, getting my bachelor's degree in business administration because I wanted to be a small business owner. I wanted to get out of polyester, but I wanted to be on my terms and if my timing when I was ready to do that. I wasn't ready yet. My ducks were not quite in a row. So I spent the next 10 years trying to figure out who Patrick was supposed to be. It ultimately lost me a marriage.
Yep.
Very dark, very, very difficult to deal with. Once you are out of this profession, you are out of sight, out of mind. Those people on your shift, they were your friends, they were your colleagues, they were your best friends. You'd die for them. They would die for you. But their world continues. Your spot was replaced with somebody else that is now holding that position, and you're on the out. And it takes about 6 months for you to just disappear. It's like in the movie Back to the Future, when Marty McFly is looking at his family members sort of slowly being erased. That's what happens to you. When you get out of law enforcement, you leave an agency, whether it's because you wanted to or because you were pushed out or you got fired or whatever. You are on their mind for no more than 6 months. That's it.
Yep.
And you're not invited to get-togethers. You don't get phone calls, text messages. Yeah, you might be Facebook friends, and somebody might hit a like button on something that you post, but that's the extent of that relationship at that point. And that is very difficult it was for me to process and to try to create a new tribe, a new belonging somewhere. And it took 10 years.
How did you finally start getting past it and like going in a more positive direction?
It took admitting there was a problem.
Yeah.
Honestly, it wasn't until the end of my marriage where I was told I wasn't the same person anymore. I didn't see it, of course. I'm the one going through the transition on a daily basis, not seeing that change. My spouse, on the other hand, was seeing the change, experiencing the change. Once that ended, and then there was the recap, what did happen? I had to admit that there was a problem, that I had not successfully admitted to myself that something needed to change, something needed to happen. And the unfortunate catalyst for that was a divorce.
Yep.
And like in so many other relationships, it takes the break to become the catalyst to get fixed.
Yep. We've got to do a better job in law enforcement, first responders in general, of not forgetting people when they leave. My dad was in law enforcement for 40 years, and then once he was done, it's just kind of like a lot of them forgot who he was, and it's taken a few years, and it's gotten better, but even still, like, people just, they might throw you that random like on Facebook, but that's the extent of it. They don't call and say, "Hey man, how's your day going?"
Mm-hmm.
And it sucks because it's a part of who we are, and then it's just gone. Because I got out for a year during COVID, and for, like you said, about 6 months, and then after that, it was just kind of like, "Hey, I'm gonna like your post on Facebook," but they didn't call, they didn't text, except for a few of them, and it's rough because it changes. You change yourself for so long for a career, and then you try to fit back into normal society, and it's different. So
Yeah.
we've got to do better. And I actually saw a post the other day, on ADB, and I was like, we got to start doing better in a lot of these areas. We really do. So let me ask you about ADB. Jennifer, with first responder coaching, I'm actually going through a program, and a couple months ago, she brought it to my attention, and me being the nerd that I am, working on my doctorate, I'm like, man, another source of learning and networking. Yeah, sign me up, and I love it.
Good.
There's every day there's just so much stuff, and like, I always get on there and just expect to see something like that. I'm just like, man, I didn't know anything about that. And I had Keith on last week, Groundsel, and I was telling him last week, man, you're like pumping out these articles like a pro.
Yeah.
And he kind of started chuckling. He's like, dude, when you did it as long as I do, I've got a lot of stuff to talk about. And I'm like, yeah, that's fair. But what I like in there is the quality of like people. And that's why I kind of jokingly called everybody else out when I was like, hey, everybody said they were going to sign up, and no one did. But I did that for a purpose, not out of malice, but I don't want it to become an echo chamber.
Yeah.
And granted, there's several of y'all that signed up, and I appreciate that wholeheartedly. But I just love it because it's so much different in there because it's positive. Like, there's no negative. There's nobody in there griping like, man, hate going to work today, or I got to work my 5th day straight. Like, it's just positivity, and it changes your mindset at just like the granular level of like, I need to have this mindset more often.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, how ADB got born. ADB stands for a different breed. And Monty, the founder and CEO of ADB, he was actually a business coach of mine. And I've been working with Monty for going on 3 years now. And he would constantly, so he's got this other business, this other company called Wealthy Servant. And Wealthy Servant is about helping first responders take the work ethic that we have and build a business to earn the generational wealth that we all deserve through the gift of abundance. Right. So we take this mindset that we have, the can do, the problem solving that we've got, because we walk into domestics all the time, not knowing what the hell is going on, figure it out, solve it, problem solve, problem saving solve, right? Same thing with accidents. You roll up to an accident, you're like, how in the world did that car end up over there with this person over here, right? And their shoes over there, like, how did this happen, right? And we figure it out. We solve the problem. Well, we have all the skills of being a business owner. We just don't know how to utilize, how to translate. It's like trying to take a military career and put it on a civilian resume. No way to translate it. So I started working with Monty and Wealthy Servant, and he kept referring to all first responders as, well, we're just a different breed. We have this in us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the profession that we're in. And that just manifested itself into the training or the ADB Nation, right? There's two different aspects right now of ADB. There's ADB Training and ADB Nation. And ADB Training is just that. It's elite level training, a different style, a different worth of training. Our instructors are all subject matter experts in whatever field it is that they're instructing. We don't hire what's been coined podium preachers or academy level instructors reading off death by PowerPoint, next slide, right? These are all guys and gals that have been in the trenches doing the job, like Keith, who, has written 7 books. He's been in undercover, a deep undercover for, long periods of time. He's been a chief of police several times. He's done international training. I mean, the dude's resume is just, you had him as a guest. So, your peeps have met him. He and Monty have designed the first nationally certification for undercover work. To become an undercover detective or undercover officer, it will now have its own certification. And it's got some prerequisite courses. There's a 3-day class that you've got to take, and then you get to the 7-day class. And that 7-day class is the certification. And it's 12 hours a day, bro.
Wow.
7 straight days. You're in the thick of it, doing everything you can think of in an undercover from every aspect of what that is and the different roles that the different people have. That's the type of training we're doing. We're going to have the first ever cryptocurrency certification for investigators to become a certified cryptocurrency investigator.
Wow.
We're going to have the very first, there's more certification that we're pushing out, and it escapes me right now. Anyway, so the things that ADB Training is doing is providing that next level training that we as officers beg for and can't get. It doesn't exist, right? We're mandated to take training, and we get the same training year after year after year. A year or an hour of first aid, CPR, your requalification time, whether that's once a year or 4 times a year or somewhere in between, different states have different requirements. I think Texas has a requirement for a de-escalation course you've got to take every year. Georgia has every other year you've got to take elder abuse. But so you get your 8 hours of in-service training, all right, and then you get whatever death by a PowerPoint, but you don't get to the immersive level of training, right? So that's ADB, and we've got everything from that undercover certification to how to beat the burnout course, and in the health and wellness space. We've got leadership classes. If Rick Anderson comes on your show, if he signed up, great. If he hasn't, I'll poke the bear.
Yeah.
Rick Anderson is a 30+ year SWAT guy, SWAT leader, right? And he's teaching a leadership course and a de-escalation course. We've got that cryptocurrency. We've got follow the money that Monty's teaching. It's a different breed of training, right? So there's that. But then we have the ADB Nation, which is what you joined into.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, it's a community on a mission to provide exactly the points that you put out. A safe place of like-minded lions to go and to have the fellowship and the community that we need. That isn't just at your agency or just in your community or just in your county or your state. You're in Oklahoma. Monica Crawford's in Oklahoma, but we've got Nick Maglio, who's in Rhode Island, and Stephen Maurer that's in Pennsylvania, and I'm in Georgia. We've got Colorado, Texas, Arizona, California, Alabama. I mean, we're covering the entire country, and you've got access through the ADB Nation to talk to those officers directly from across the country with different backgrounds, to include the instructors of ADB training. So you don't just go to ADB training and take a class, and at the end of the class you leave. You still have access to that instructor. So 3 days down, or 3 weeks or 3 months down the road, and you come in contact with the type of scenario that you went to Keith's class, you can actually jump into ADB Nation and ask a question.
Yep.
And not to
how
mention,
often do we not get that in real life? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. How has this not existed beforehand? And that's what ADB Nation is. It's a community on a mission to provide the essential resources, and that's community support, training, fellowship that we as an industry are starving for.
Yep. Absolutely. And I don't know how familiar you are with ILETA. Similar goals. Like, their goal is to make the next generation of trainers to be able to give quality training to people. And like, when we go to their conference every year, like, it's the same type of thing. Like, you get there and like, it's actually fun to be there and learn and supportive. And you're like, man, this is so much different than being back at my agency. And not that my agency's bad by any means. I'm not saying that.
No.
But like, there's always a negative presence wherever you work at. Somebody's going to be negative.
Mm-hmm. You've got negative Nancy's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And even, my story of, being kind of pushed out from the college, it's not a negative story. It had a negative impact on me, but it was just, the way that agency operates. It's still a great agency. It's got some good leaders in there. It's got some bad managers, but it's got some great leaders there. And every agency is that way. It's going to have a negative Nancy somewhere.
Yep. Where do you see ADB ending up over the next 5 years?
Oh gosh, in 5 years. So, right now we're pushing 20 classes a month in ADB training. The goal by December of this year is to have 180 classes per month across the country.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. And we've got a waiting list of instructors that want to come and teach at ADB. And we've actually had to tighten down the requirements to come in because so many people are beating down the door to come teach because of the mission and the goal. It resonates with our industry, with our career field. And it has been a long time coming. So on top of the 180 classes per month, the ADB Nation, we're looking to have somewhere around 10,000 people by the end of this year. And in 5 years, maybe 100,000 people.
Yeah.
From, there's thousands of agencies across the country.
Yeah.
Thousands of agencies. And the average agency is about 10 officers. If you break that down, like 10, 15 officers, I think is a stat that I heard today. So there's the possibility of that number. Will we make that? I hope so. It'd be awesome to have that amount of people. Can you imagine the number of collective years of experience that would provide a single individual officer that they could call upon?
Yep. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
And then every year we're going to have ADB week, and it's open to all the members of ADB and all the instructors at ADB Training. And it's going to be January of 2026. It's in Vegas. It's a week long, and it's going to like a powerhouse of speakers. You get to meet all the people that go there, for it, and get to shake hands with people from all over the country, like-minded, as I said, lions, right? We're not sheep. We're the lions. We're the, the 2% of the nation that can actually do the job.
Right.
And it's going to grow like a weed.
That's awesome. And there's mobile apps coming too, right?
What is? Say it again. I'm sorry.
There's mobile apps coming too, right?
Yes.
Like for Apple and Android.
Yep. There is a mobile app that is coming right now. It is just URL supported, which most smartphones can still operate it. It's not the greatest right now, mobile friendly, but it's navigable. So, but there is an app coming. Yeah, it's in development.
Well, and I think once that goes live, I think you're going to see it skyrocket even more because we're at work 95% of the time. We're filling in an extra shift, and maybe I want to get on here and get some extra training. If somebody posts a video to watch or a podcast to listen to.
Oh yeah,
there you go. And even if you make it just a little bit more convenient, how cops are. They're going to take that little bit and be like, yeah, all right, now I'll sign up.
Yep.
And so I love it. And, like I said, I was honored just to have you on here because I'm just a beat cop from Oklahoma. I mean, there's plenty of stuff that I'm good at, but at the end of the day, I'm a beat cop from Oklahoma. And I love hearing new ideas and stuff from just all across the country because they can apply here and they can be brought here. And if it makes things better, then why wouldn't I,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. For a box of donuts a month, you can join the ADB Nation and get that access, not that this needs to be an infomercial for ADB, but it's a great thing. And I feel like in 5 years, this industry will have a shift in the direction it needs to go. Like the pendulum, like politics and law enforcement, it is a pendulum, right? Mm-hmm. And right now or in the last 10 years or so, we swung way one side and now starting to come back down. We're not quite back in the middle of the road yet, but we'll start to swing that other direction in the next 5 years, and we'll have more positive than negative. I feel like, and I honestly believe ADB is going to be a big initiative in that.
That's awesome. I love it. Love it. Now here's the hard-hitting question of the day.
All right, shoot.
How did a cop start a comedy podcast?
Would you believe 2 fingers of a good bourbon and a cigar?
I could actually believe that.
Yeah. All right. So, the Knock and Talk show started as a cocktail napkin doodle. I was sitting on my back deck with some old timers that I grew up with. So my best friend is 10 years my senior to the day. We share the same birthday.
Wow.
And he was my very first patrol sergeant back in 2000. And we were sitting on my back deck with a couple other old timers from his era that he policed as patrolmen with. And we were just telling remember when stories. Dude, you remember when so-and-so did this? That shit was so funny. Like, I can't believe that he got away with such and such when he said that, or just the big fish stories of, dude, you remember that chase? Do you remember that arrest? And I was thinking to myself, man, because we had just lost 2 guys from that era that retired and died in 2 years of retirement. Very common in this profession.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, man, I wish they were here to tell their version of the story, because we were trying to tell their story, because that's what we were doing, is we were reminiscing about those 2 guys that had just passed away, and they were great guys and they had great stories. And one of them did 4 tours in Vietnam, and then came back and became a cop. And the stories he would tell about post Vietnam policing was just wild. Like, you can't imagine what policing was like in the 70s if you're a young buck now just coming out of the academy. You have no idea what policing was like, and now those stories are dead. And I was like, we can't let these stories die. So we started, I feel like there's a podcast in this, and these dudes were like, what the is a podcast? I'm like, okay. All right. You know what? Go watch Nick at Night. I think
Yeah.
go back and watch My 3 Sons or All in the Family or whatever. So I started doing some research into podcasting. I'd never listened to a podcast. I knew what they were. I knew what they were about. Like, I knew they existed, and I knew it was a platform for sharing, and it was a place where a lot of people were starting to go to get their news, right? Because the belief system in mainstream media was really beginning to dwindle 3 years ago. Actually, before that, but so I started thinking, and I started working with my best friend, like, what could we call this podcast? And it needs to be about the funny stories, because this is a dark profession, and we really struggle sometimes to put that uniform back on, go back to work, and deal with the crap that we have to deal with, right? Both from the people in the community that don't trust us, don't like us just because of the polyester and the badge. It's not personal. They just don't like the stuff that we wear. But also the people that wear the same thing that we wear, we have to worry about the crap we get from them. And it's just sometimes difficult to put that shit on and go to work. So how do we remember that we can have fun? How do we remember that there are funny things that happen, and to use levity as a coping mechanism for a very dark and dangerous career field? So I started going through police terms in my head, like what resonates with cop talk. Right?
Yep.
And one of my favorite things to do after I got out of investigations and went back into patrol was knock and talks. I loved doing them. After being a burglary detective for a year, and 90% of your burglaries are drug related, I learned the power of knock and talks, because I was going around and just doing follow-ups to burglaries and knocking on neighbors' doors, and I would stumble into a grow house, or I'd stumble into a cooking lab or something like that, and so I was like, all right, so what about knock and talk? What about knock and talk? And my buddy was like, yeah, dude, that's pretty cool. What's your logo going to be? was like, oh man, it's gonna be cool. It's gonna be a door. And he's like, what? So I actually worked with a logo designer out of California, and if you look, my pin's not working, but it's a door. The badge is the door knocker. The microphone is a badge. There's 3 lines at the top of the microphone. Those were my sergeant stripes.
Right.
So I worked with a really cool guy. He actually is a psychologist that turned to graphic design, and we dove deep into what the logo needed to be. So
right.
Not that you want to know all that, but that's how that came about, was preserving the funny stories. We all have the funny stories, and we need to share the stories so the stories don't die, but also so we can remember we can have fun at work. It's not all dark. It's not all, hellfire and brimstone. It is actually fun sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll tell you, one of my first guests, Dakota Hanks, if you can get him on your show, great podcast guest. He's on mine twice. He told a story, and I won't steal his thunder, but it involved chickens.
Another Okie.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So if you can get him on your show, fantastic guest.
We're Facebook friends, so I bet you I could probably swing that one.
Good. You should. He loves being on podcasts, by the way.
Yeah.
And he's got a great stories. One that which shocked the crap out of me. He told me one time he ran code for 45 minutes.
Yeah, I've done it for 2 hours at the tribal agency.
Running code.
I did it like last weekend. Yeah.
That is crazy talk for city folk that, might take 20 minutes to get from one side of, your jurisdiction.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I worked at municipalities before this, but I live on the northern half of our reservation, and it was every bit of an hour and 45 minutes a couple weeks ago when we had a drone call out on a SWAT deal, and I was heading home from a part-time gig, and they were like, "Hey, we need you." And I was like, "All right, I'll be there as soon as I can." And it was every bit of an hour and 45 minutes.
Jeez. Did you pass any low-flying planes on your way? I mean, God.
I passed a lot of different life biomes. I think I went through some Great Plains. I went through some woods. I went through some hills, urban turnpikes, rural areas. A little bit of everything.
That's crazy.
And what's funny is I ended up being out there for like 8 hours, and like I said, it's more on the rural side of the reservation, and like I had to limp it like 35 minutes away just to get gas because I wasn't making it home because there wasn't anything open in that town, and I wasn't going to test it. I wasn't going to test it and be like, because they were like, "Hey, like you might be able to get gas there after hours," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to go to somewhere where I know there's a 24-hour like open." Sorry,
jeez.
But it happens in Oklahoma, especially because he's a tribal officer too.
Yeah.
And it happens, and it happens pretty frequently. Luckily, we've went to districts for the most part for our patrol guys. And so theirs isn't as bad as it was. But when I first started there and was a patrolman, I got a homicide one morning that was already secured. They just needed one of our officers down there because it occurred on the neighboring reservation. And it took me every bit of 2 hours to get there because I was driving a Dodge pickup running hot. And, unfortunately, there was nobody that was like, "Hey, I'm a lot closer. I'll at least go there until you get there." Yeah, Dodge pickup trucks aren't fast when you're going, across 11 counties, basically.
No.
And I got there when I got there, and I get there, and like the BIA and the FBI are arguing over who's going to work the scene, and I'm like, "Hey, like I'll put my handcuffs on this guy and take him to jail for you. You guys can fight over who's going to work it, but I'm just going to get him out of here for you." And I got him out there and left, but it was 3 hours of driving afterwards because I'd drive back to where I went to do my report, and I'm just like, all I did was put handcuffs on anybody. I didn't do anything important, like, but it had to be done,
right?
And no. So where can they listen to Knock and Talk at?
So it's in all the places that you would want to find it, right? It's on
Yep.
it's on Apple. It's on YouTube, Facebook. There's links from LinkedIn. Let's see, I believe Google Podcast. It was on Samsung Podcast. It's on iHeartRadio. It's on all the places wherever
Okay.
you consume your podcasting.
Yep. That's awesome. That's awesome. I don't want to tie
There
up your
is a
whole.
fake Knock and Talk show out there too that started right after I did. It's
So
a
it's a knockoff.
it's a knockoff talking show. It's a husband and wife combo in Oklahoma. I mean, in Ohio, and lovely couple. I was actually a guest on their show, and we talked about it. But I am the original Knock and Talk show.
The OG.
The OG, yeah.
That's awesome. I don't want to tie up your whole night. Again, I want to thank you for being here.
It was a pleasure, man. I loved it.
You know, I love what you guys are doing with ADB. I'm definitely going to put the podcast on. I've got an hour drive to work every morning, so I'm definitely I'm going to give you some spins.
Okay, all right. Hey, I've got 40 episodes. I took a 2-year hiatus after the divorce. I just didn't have the space to set up a studio in a 1-bedroom apartment. So, but back in the house, I'll have the green screen up so this fading stuff won't happen. And I've got a whole litany of guests now from ADB. So the Knock and Talk show is back, baby. Bringing awesome. The band back.
Yep. Well, again, thank you for coming.
Yeah, bro.
And I'm here if you need me. Like, I'm always here I'll tell you some wild stories because we had a casino in my last agent. Well, we have one at my current agency too, but I'm not in the patrol setting right now. I'm more in training. So, but you know, there's a lot of wild stuff that happens at casinos.
Oh,
shocker! I know it shocks everybody.
Imagine that.
I know it shocks everybody.
Sin City.
Yep.
Well, hey, Brent, if you ever need a last minute guest, somebody cancels, let me know. I'd be happy to come on if I'm available. If you just, you know, I love doing this. I love sharing stories. So it's interesting being on this side, as I mentioned earlier, being on the receiving side of the questions it's interesting. So I've had a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I wish you all the best success. Once the national average is 10 episodes. So if you make it to episode 11, you've gone further than 90% of podcasters.
You're number 8.
Hey, all right. Oh, dang it. Shame I'm not number 7. That would have been great with my badge number.
That would have actually been kind of funny. That would have been funny. I would have gave you credit for that one. Well, I won't tie you up. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
And have a good night.
You too, brother. Stay safe.
You too.